Socialism is a philosophy of failure, the creed of ignorance, and the gospel of envy. Its inherent virtue is the equal sharing of misery. Quote from Sir Winston Churchill. The Catholic Men's Podcast, Episode 24, Fleeing Cuba. I'm so sick and tired of hearing socialists say, oh, Venezuela is just an isolated case, and people are way happier in socialist economies anyway. That is wrong on so many levels. Have you ever heard of someone trying to escape America? No, you've never heard that. But you have heard of plenty of people trying to escape the USSR or any commie country like North Korea. How about Cuba? The story that I found last night left me speechless at seeing what people go through to escape communist Cuba. It's from a book called True Stories of Great Escapes, compiled by Reader's Digest, and all of the stories are just stunning. With this one, it switches from first and third-person storytelling really rapidly, so just be warned. This is True Stories of Great Escapes, Stowaway, by Armando Socorros Ramirez, as told to Dennis Fodor and John Reddy. The jet engines of the Iberia Airlines DC-8 thundered in ear-splitting crescendo as the big plane taxied toward where we huddled in the tall grass just off the end of the runway at Havana's Jose Marti Airport. For months, my friend Jorge Perez Blanco and I had been planning to stow away in a wheel well on this flight, number 904, Iberia's once-weekly non-stop run from Havana to Madrid. Now, in the late afternoon of June 3, 1969, our moment had come. We realized that we were pretty young to be taking such a big gamble. I was 17, Jorge 16, but we were both determined to escape from Cuba, and our plans had been carefully made. We knew that departing airlines taxied to the end of the 11,500-foot runway, stopped momentarily after turning around, then soared at full throttle down the runway to take off. We wore rubber-soled shoes to aid us in crawling up the wheels and carried ropes to secure ourselves inside the wheel well. We had also stuffed cotton in our ears as protection against the shriek of the 4 jet engines. Now we lay sweating with fear as the craft swung into its about-face, the jet blast flattening the grass all around us. "Let's run!" I shouted to Jorge. We dashed onto the runway and sprinted toward the left-hand wheels of the momentarily stationary plane. As Jorge began to scramble up the 42-inch high tires, I saw there was not room for us both in the single well. "I'll try the other side," I shouted. Quickly, I climbed onto the right wheels, grabbed a strut, and twisting and wriggling, pulled myself into the semi-dark well. The plane began rolling immediately, and I grabbed some machinery to keep from falling out. The roar of the engines nearly deafened me. As we became airborne, the huge double wheels, scorching hot from takeoff, began folding into the compartment. I tried to flatten myself against the overhead as they came closer. Then, in desperation, I pushed at them with my feet. But they pressed powerfully upward, squeezing me terrifyingly against the roof of the well. Just when I felt that I would be crushed, the wheels locked in place and the bay doors beneath them closed, plunging me into darkness. So there I was, my 5-foot 4-inch, 140-pound frame wedged in a maze of conduits and machinery. I couldn't move enough to tie myself to anything, so I stuck my rope behind a pipe. Then, before I had time to catch my breath, the bay doors suddenly dropped open again, and the wheels stretched out into their landing position. I held on for dear life, swinging over the abyss, wondering if I had been spotted, if even now the plane was turning back to hand me over to Castro's police. By the time the wheels began retracting again, I had seen a bit of extra space among all the machinery where I could safely squeeze. Now I knew there was room for me, even though I could scarcely breathe. After a few minutes, I touched one of the tires and found that it had cooled off. I swallowed some aspirin tablets against the head-splitting noise and began to wish that I had worn something warmer than my light sport shirt and green fatigues. Up in the cockpit of Flight 904, Captain Valentin Vara del Rey, 44, had settled into the routine of the overnight flight, which would last 8 hours and 20 minutes. with its aircraft and its 147 passengers, plus a crew of 10 lifting off at 170 miles per hour. But right after takeoff, a red light on the instrument panel had remained lighted, indicating improper retraction of the landing gear.
"Are you having difficulty?"
the control tower asked. "Yes," replied Vara del Rey. "There is an indication that the right wheel hasn't closed properly. I'll repeat the procedure." The captain re-lowered the landing gear, then raised it again. This time, the red light blinked out. Dismissing the incident as a minor malfunction, the captain turned his attention to climbing to assigned cruising altitude. On leveling out, he observed that the temperature outside was negative 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside, the stewardesses began serving dinner to the passengers. Shivering uncontrollably from the bitter cold, I wondered if Jorge had made it into the other wheel well and began thinking about what had brought me to this desperate situation. I thought about my parents and my girl, Maria Esther, and wondered what they would think when they learned what I had done. My father's a plumber, and I have 4 brothers and a sister. We are poor, like most Cubans. Our house in Havana has just one large room. 11 people live in it, or did. Food was scarce and strictly rationed. About the only fun I had was playing baseball. When I turned 16, the government shipped me off to vocational school in Betancourt, a sugarcane village in Matanzas province. There, I was supposed to learn welding, but classes were often interrupted to send us off to plant cane. Young as I was tired of living in a state that controlled everyone's life. I dreamed of freedom. I wanted to become an artist and live in the United States, where I had an uncle. I knew that thousands of Cubans had got to America and had done well there. As the time approached when I would be drafted, I thought more and more of trying to get away. But how? I knew that 2 plane loads of people were allowed to leave Havana for Miami each day, but there was a waiting list of 800,000 for those flights. Also, if you did sign up to leave, the government looked on you as a gusano, worm, and life became even less bearable. My hopes seemed futile. Then I met Jorge at a Havana baseball game. After the game, we got to talking. I found out that Jorge, like myself, was disillusioned with Cuba. "The system takes away all your freedom forever," Jorge complained. These were my thoughts as I lay in the freezing darkness, more than 5 miles above the Atlantic Ocean. By now we had been in the air about an hour, and I was getting lightheaded from the lack of oxygen. Was it really only a few hours earlier that I had bicycled through the rain with Jorge and hidden in the grass? Was Jorge safe? My parents? Maria Esther? I drifted into unconsciousness. The sun rose over the Atlantic like a great golden globe, its rays glinting off the silver and red fuselage of Iberia's DC-8 as it crossed the European coast high over Portugal. With the end of the 5,563-mile flight in sight, Captain Vara del Rey began his descent toward Madrid's Barajas airport. Arrival would be at 8 a.m. local time, the captain told his passengers over the intercom, and the weather in Madrid was sunny and pleasant. Shortly after passing over Toledo, Vara del Rey let down his landing gear. As always, the maneuver was accompanied by a buffeting as the wheels hit the slipstream and a 200-mile-per-hour turbulence swirled through the wheel wells. Now the plane went into its final approach. Now a spurt of flame and smoke came from the tires as the DC-8 touched down at about 140 miles per hour. It was a perfect landing. No bumps. After a brief post-flight check, Vara del Rey walked down the ramp steps and stood by the nose of the plane, waiting for a car to pick him up along with his crew. Nearby, there was a sudden soft plop as the nearly frozen body of Armando Socadas fell to the concrete apron beneath the plane. Jose Roca Lorenzana, a security guard, was the first to reach the crumpled figure. "When I touched his clothes, they were frozen stiff as wood," Roca said. "All he did was make a strange sound, a kind of moan." "I couldn't believe it at first," Vara del Rey said when told of Armando. "He had ice over his nose and mouth, and his color. Impossible. Impossible." First thing I remember after losing consciousness was hitting the ground at the Madrid airport. Then I blacked out again and woke up later at the Gran Hospital de la Beneficencia in downtown Madrid, more dead than alive. When they took my temperature, it was so low that it didn't even register on the thermometer. "Am I in Spain?" was my first question. And then, "Where's Jorge?" Jorge is believed to have been knocked down by the jet blast while trying to climb into the other wheel well. He was arrested by Cuban police and served a short term in prison before being released. Doctors said later that my condition was comparable to that of a patient undergoing deep freeze surgery, a delicate process performed only under carefully controlled conditions. Dr. Jose Maria Pajares, who cared for me, called my survival a medical miracle. A few days after my escape, I was up and around the hospital, playing cards with my police guard and reading stacks of letters from all over the world. I especially liked one from a girl in California. "You're a hero," she wrote, "but not very wise." My uncle, Elo Fernandez, who lived in New Jersey, telephoned and invited me to come to the United States to live with him. The International Rescue Committee arranged my passage. An expert at Brooks Air Force Base, School of Aerospace Medicine in San Antonio, Texas, said that at that altitude, in an unpressurized, unwarmed compartment, a man would normally retain consciousness for only 2 or 3 minutes and live only a short while longer. Perhaps a Spanish doctor summed up Armando Socorros' experience most effectively. He survived with luck, and more luck. Armando Socorros now lives in Florida. He's happily married and a college student. "I want to be a good citizen and contribute something to this country, for I love it here. You can smell freedom in the air." I often think of my friend Jorge. We both knew the risk we were taking and that we might be killed in our attempt to escape from Cuba. But it seemed worth the chance. Even knowing the risks, I would try to escape again if I had to. The end of Stowaway, from True Stories of Great Escapes. Enjoy your freedom and Godspeed.